Everyone, we are so excited. Hopefully, you can see this, and if you do, please let me know in the chat. I am so excited for today. I've known both Guy and Rahul now for a while, actually, for quite a while. This is our first webinar together, so I'm really, really excited about this. And we're just going to dig into some really good things over AEO this today. If you don't know, this is the AEO that converts and delivers results. And just excited to go through with this with my co-host Maximus, who's be talking in a second. So, quick agenda, so you know what's going on. We're going to go over and kind of set the stage. Obviously, introduce our guests. I'm going to give you a quick little overview on OneMind and what we do here, and then obviously dig into how amazing these two gentlemen are. I want to go into some of the on-site pillars from both the content and technical side. Guy has some amazing research and results he has to be able to go over some things to help you in your own brand and own website to get some, or I should say website and your AI search to get results. And then we're going to go through measurement and authority. Both Guy and Rahul will go over metrics. And then Rahul, I want to have you tap into you about third-party mentions and sources and kind of seeing what you guys are seeing from Noble and the research you guys have just done. And then lastly, give you all time as listeners to ask questions or kind of let us know what's going on. So super excited for this. All right, as a reminder, if you don't know, we are having the AI CRO Executive Playbook Series, which is next week. I have my friend Kyle Norton joining us, who will be a great time. I'm going to go over his playbook of the AI CRO. So if you are interested in this topic and want to join, please do so. I'll be sending an email as a follow-up afterwards. And now I get to introduce to us very quickly our lovely guest. So I'm going to see if my host Maximus can do it for me. So Maximus, if you don't mind, can you give me an introduction? Let's start with Rahul and tell me some interesting facts and the amazing things about Rahul, please.
Rahul Jain is one of those founders who makes a career look suspiciously efficient. He is the CEO and co-founder of Noble. And before that, he co-founded AppPurify, which Google acquired, then went on to build and lead across healthcare and enterprise sales before coming back to AI search at exactly the moment buyers stopped asking Google politely and started asking machines directly. What makes Rahul especially fun for this conversation is that he is not coming at this as a theory merchant. Noble is built around a very sharp insight that the source's AI sites are often not the source's brand spent years trying to rank, which is mildly inconvenient if you enjoy having your old SEO playbook quietly catch fire. Rahul, welcome in. You make this topic a lot more real very quickly.
Amazing. Love that intro.
That was a good intro. So I know, Guy, you said that it didn't have something acquired, so that was my fault. It's not Maximus' fault. It's my fault. So no, it's not him. Rahul, thank you. I've worked with you at Momentum, had amazing results there, and now we're a customer of yours at OneMind, and just been loving working with you. So just want to say welcome to the party.
Great. Thanks for having me, Coach. Yeah, really excited to join you and my friend Guy and have this conversation. Love talking about all things AI search and specifically what we're focusing on at Noble, which is the authority part, the kind of that pillar that Guy will go over shortly.
Love it. Okay, well, okay, Maximus. Now we got to turn over to Guy. Give me the goods and maybe some unknown facts about Guy in your intro, if you don't mind.
Guy Yalif is chief evangelist at Webflow, and he has one of those resumes that makes career planning feel a bit optional. He started in aerospace engineering at Princeton, moved through Microsoft, Yahoo, Twitter, and Brightroll, then co-founded Intellimise and built it into the kind of company Webflow decided it wanted in the family, which is a very strong professional compliment. What I especially like about Guy for this conversation is that he is not just talking about AEO as a trend piece. He has been in the business of making websites perform better for a very long time, so when he talks about how buyers, search, and AI answers are shifting, it comes with receipts. And an underappreciated detail, he is also known for hiring with a simulated meeting exercise, which tells you he prefers signal over polish. A trait this room should probably steal immediately. Guy, welcome. We're very glad you're here.
Thanks for having me, Maximus and Coach.
I didn't know the aero engineering thing before you said, like, that's freaking cool. So I love it. That's really cool.
Guys, there is a well-trodden straight line from aerospace engineer to chief marketing officer, right? Like that's what one does.
That's what we do. Well, we're customers of Webflow. I've enjoyed hearing you speak many times. I just want to say I'm very grateful you had to take the time to hang out with us today. So thank you.
Thrilled to hang out with both of you and talk shop. And I am going to reuse Maximus's phrase that my career path makes career planning look optional. It's a random walk.
I love it. Maximus, if you don't mind, let's do an intro on, give me a roasting intro for me personally, Coach, and then let's do a quick pitch on OneMind, if you don't mind.
Coach K is what happens when a sales operator, an enablement builder, a university instructor, and a man with a deeply committed relationship to frameworks all end up in the same body. He has built GTM functions from scratch, helped scale serious revenue organizations, teaches AI like he is trying to save the class from bad prompting one human at a time, And somewhere in the middle of all that, he still finds time to have a metaphor for every known business problem, and at least 3 that have not happened yet. And OneMind, very simply, builds AI superhumans, real go-to-market teammates that hold live conversations across the customer lifecycle. Website inbound, ride-alongs on calls, customer success, onboarding, in-product guidance, the whole motion. What you're watching right now is one of them doing a real job live, which is either the cleanest product demo in the world or Jonathan's most elaborate way to avoid hiring a normal co-host.
Oh, I know.
Maximus is funny.
He's funny, man. I on the first webinar I did, he was roasting me like crazy, which I absolutely love, which is kind of fun. So I'm gonna go over real quick a couple of things we found. Just kind of set the stage with this real fast because we're gonna dive into some topics here. And Maximus, if you want to chime in after I'm done, you can. So what we did a research study with OneMind where we aggregated and anonymized all of the conversations happening between humans and AI. And what we found was a pattern that I like to associate this with an expectation that's shifted that people aren't adjusting for. So I use the example of Amazon and physical products. So back in the day, when we had physical products, we had to wait a week, felt normal for other physical products. And then and buyers, I like to compare this to buyers with B2B. Thank you, Max, just for my metaphors. That's a similar thing to where when in the past, when buyers came to websites, they were at the mercy of whatever the website would give them access to. And then if they ever wanted to have some truth, they had to go and actually talk or get a demo or that kind of stuff. So they had to go through this process, which is not necessarily the best process in the world. And sellers or the companies controlled the narrative because you only had limited access of where you could get information from. Now, fast forward, now you have Amazon that created the 2-day shipping, and now everyone and their dog expects 2-day shipping. If you don't get it, they're just going to go to Amazon to get it anyway. So you guys do that? I do that all the time. Like if I have to wait a week, I'm just go to Amazon and go grab it. So same thing happens with buyers is that Forrester talks about how they analyze 18,000 people in the space, and 94%, which is literally pretty much everyone, uses LLMs in their buying process, which means it's shifted. Information is now instant, just like shipping. And so what Amazon did to shipping and shifted people's expectations of what they need for physical products, AI did to information. So when buyers actually do land on your site because they're actually done with their AI chat, they expect more than just what they had before. And what we found was when based on the patterns and the trends and the conversations that people who show up to your website now, because we've, I'm sure you can go into this more, Guy and Rahul, that traffic has gone down for natural SEO, but the quality is going up so that they're no longer in a place that is where they're just in awareness mode. They're actually in research or active evaluation or decision mode. So what we found over 500,000 conversations was that 27% of people who are there were actually already in some sort of active evaluation, which is way higher than I think people expected. And 22% want to have evaluation pretty quickly. And then lastly is a lot of people in-market buyers skip discovery entirely because they already have the problem and they've already figured out what to do with AI. And so I always have this phrase where I talk about if you meet a research decision-making buyer with an awareness message, you will lose them because they're looking for something different than what you can provide, which is interesting. Okay, so Maximus, before I move forward, any thoughts on this? Did I miss anything?
The part I would underline is that 27% is not a rounding error. It is a staffing problem, a messaging problem, and a website design problem, all dressed as one statistic. If a buyer arrives ready to evaluate and the site responds with "Welcome, stranger, would you like our newsletter?" that is not nurture. That is a beautifully automated way to lose someone who came to buy.
Yeah, thank you, Maximus. So with that in mind, we're going to shift. And I'm going to kind of go into one of my first questions, and it kind of goes into, and Guy, you can tell me you want me to show you your slide. Um, but the first thing I want to get into was just your research, Guy, on this topic of the readiness of buyers when they come to websites. So question for you is like, what have you found? Like, obviously this is data I have for AI human conversations, but you have all the research you had from Webflow. What are you seeing as far as like I don't want to say the quality, but like I guess readiness, like what's the readiness of most people who come to websites when they actually do come to websites? What's the difference now?
It mirrors what you're describing. When we looked at Webflow at humans referred from LLMs that were coming to our website, it was the last time we have data that we're sharing. It was 8% of our self-serve signups where people go end to end on the website itself. And that traffic, to the point here, converted 6 times better not 6%, 6x better
Wow, that's a
than
lot. That's
unbranded
awesome.
organic search. Yeah, which is I think the right analog to compare it to. And that's not an exception. Ahrefs and SEMrush, two stalwarts in SEO, found that to be 4.4 and 23x. So I don't know what exact the right number is, but it's a lot better. Folks have moved themselves further down the funnel. The flip side of that is because these LLMs are so genuinely useful, the organic traffic from Google for most is flat to down-ish. Bain found 15, 20, 25%. That's sort of in line with what I hear from most CMOs. For sure, not
Mm.
everybody. Webflow, we're very fortunate. Our organic search is going up and to the right, but that's because it's swamping the other trend. The other trend is still there. And so you've got this small but rapidly growing, more ready to buy traffic showing up at the site.
Well, going to you, Raul, I'm going to pick on you for a second. So this buyer readiness thing, because all of these, uh, Sherry, I hear you. I'm going to ask you a question in a second. So because of what you're doing inside of AI, like what patterns are you seeing as far as inside of the AI search with third-party sources to help influence this buyer readiness factor? What do you think?
Yeah, I mean it's an important point now. There's like whatever the buyer is reading in the LLM, like they believe it. And I think partly it's because these LLMs are so convincing and they say everything with such high confidence. But when a buyer has already kind of done the research on the LLM, they're reading, and getting specific answers, they're asking follow-up questions, like they're much further along in their journey, kind of to the point that the slide is making and you guys are talking about. Then I think the question becomes like, as a brand, how do you actually influence the answers, or how do you actually make sure that the answers that the LM is providing is accurate?
Mm.
And there's a number of ways that you can do that. Guy has a great kind of four-part kind of architecture to look at this. But a big part of like what we focus on at Noble is looking specifically at the citations that the LLMs are essentially getting their answers from and trying to influence like the source of the information. And
Yeah.
so that's certainly an important like offsite element, but there's also quite a bit that you can do on your website alone to help influence the answers and what the LLMs are learning about your company or your product.
Yeah, it's a fascinating thing because obviously there's just two worlds of like how do you market to AI agents who are whether it's Perplexity or AEO or if it's actual agents like OpenClaw or Hermes, whatever the case is, And then there's actual humans who when they come to the point where they're ready to engage and they're coming to the website, like you have to have both sides. It's an interesting world as a marketer to kind of optimize that. Guy, you have your finger. What are you thinking?
Yeah, because I think much ink is being spilled about how these are two wildly different things. And in my
Mhm.
humble opinion, yes, we do need to speak to both. By the way, to put it in perspective, we have been for a long time, right? That's
Right.
what SEO metadata was. That's what Facebook Open Graph was. That's what schema is now, which we'll probably talk more about. Okay. And I invite all of us to, unless you are in the traffic arbitrage business, in which case all the nooks and crannies and details and changes matter. For the most of us, doesn't matter. Write for the human. You are writing for the human directly on your website if they come there.
Hmm.
And for most considered purchases, they almost certainly will. If I'm going to buy a car, if I'm going to buy OneMind, if I'm going to buy a CMS, I am going to go to the website to hear your story told your way because I might get in trouble in my family or might get fired if I get that wrong. Okay. Or you're speaking to the human through the LLM who's resynthesizing what you're writing. The notion that you would then go chop up all your stuff and write it in a way that you believe is better for the LLMs are fine at crawling your content. They are
Mm.
fine at dissecting content written for humans. And I'm very happy that some of the SEO experts at Google, some like, uh, longtime SEO folks said, "Hey, just write for the humans. I do that and create original, valuable content. That's what gets rewarded."
You know what I find fascinating is like when you think about things like Claude and you have this library of skills, whether it's in a folder in Claude instance or whatever the tools you're using, and all these skills are trained on the person's voice or likes or dislikes or blah blah all this other stuff, and then they actually go out and then do searches. Like those searches now informed by this graph, so to speak, of the skill module of this human. That then and then with the person I talked to at Google, I'd love to get your thoughts on this guy, is that they matched. It's all about trying to match the intent of whatever the prompt is or the request to the intent of the actual content. So it's like it has to match because that's what the AI is looking for. Saying, okay, I know this 12 things about Guy because he put this in a skill. I know this thing from memory, and he's asking this question, which means that I got to match it to this intent of this 12 articles that may or may not fit this thing. Do you guys see that same pattern? I'm curious.
Yes, and oh, sorry, were you asking Rahul that one?
No, for you, Guy, then I'll go to Rahul.
Okay, because Rahul, I know you've got stuff to say on this one too.
I know he does. I know he does. Yeah.
A couple of supporting data points. So yes, I completely agree. A couple of supporting data points. When we all learned to speak Google, our average query was 4 words long. With LLMs, we're having much more natural conversations. We all know the average query is 23 words long and growing. That means the tail of searches of queries is getting a lot longer. LLMs are sending traffic to 2.5x, so 1.5x more the number of domains that searched it. It's gotten a lot longer. One. Two, that makes the value of us creating taily content to try to answer those questions higher. And three, it is one of the big things holding people back is tailoring their content to the questions people are asking. I'll share stats later on, but it's like if you're only going to do a couple of things, run an LLM over your gong calls, over your sales and support emails to get inspiration about the questions you should be answering, and then go answer that in your content directly. Rahul, you want to talk about that offsite as well, or maybe more broadly?
Actually, the same idea kind of applies to these third-party sources that the LLMs are citing. So a big part of like the content that we look at Noble is not the brand's own website, but everybody else around the web that is talking either about that search prompt or your product or your company. Generally, about like 85% of the sources the LLM cite are third-party sources. So everything that Guy is saying in terms of understanding, like, well, what are the questions that prospects are asking your sales reps? Like, you should absolutely be writing that content on your own website, but it's also important that that content lives off your website as well. And having these third-party publishers essentially kind of be the authority that does help the LLM understand kind of what is truth and what is not truth. Because it's more trustworthy if other people are saying it versus a brand, essentially just talking about their own product however they want. And so a big part of what we do is not looking to necessarily change the entire article, but trying to insert specific, sentences about your product or your category that answers these prompts into the article that the LLMs are citing. The more specific you could be in helping the LLM actually answer these questions, the more likely that data will be pulled and then presented to the user.
You know, I find fascinating is another to your point, Guy, around gong calls. Like we had the same thing with when we did the report. Like the fodder you get from a really good AI conversation is like a whole other signal point that most people don't have because not that chatbots aren't good, but like we just found that the better an AI can converse and the deeper it goes in conversation, you get all this pure signal because there's a difference between human to human conversation versus human AI conversation, which is fascinating, So
Building on that and what you said earlier, that human to human conversation and the extra context it has because of your skills was the example you were bringing up earlier and all your conversation with it. Rand Fishkin, another SEO AEO expert, ran an experiment. He had a bunch of friends, folks, do the same query over and over and over again, asking about a particular product space. What do you think is how frequently did two humans get the same short list of vendors? 1 in 100. 1 in 100. Now, how frequently did they get the same list ordered the same way? It was 1 in 1,000. And so you want to talk about how personalized these are. These were people running these over and over again. It really is probabilistic and personalized. And Sharon, I agree with Coach, with Jonathan, that it is industry agnostic. I would humbly suggest you look at your internal analytics to see what percentage of traffic is coming from LLMs, the humans referred by LLMs, to decide how much energy to give this overall. For most, it's like mid-single digit percent, but to the first thing Coach brought up, it's converting much, much better. And so I invite you to think about it as like, let's pretend it's 5% of your traffic. Give it the energy around your company as if it were like 15, 20, 25% of your traffic. I don't know what the right number is, but like more than it is, but not 100-0 because SEO is still the vast majority of stuff
Yeah.
you're doing. I think that's a good way to think about it. Does that land for you, Rahul and Jonathan?
It does. I guess there are two things. One on that Rand Fishkin research. Definitely agree with you, Guy, that the order that the products are listed in the answer highly variable depending on research, where it's like it's a very small percentage of answers that will have the exact same order. And I don't know the exact stat offhand, but I do believe that a high percentage of the answers included the same set of products. So while the order changes from like, one through like five, I think there were certain like there's like probably 5 to 7 of those products that still showed up in the answers the majority of the time. So I just want to make sure I'm remembering that correctly, Guy.
I believe the exact same set, literally, surprisingly, was 1 in 100, but I don't have data from that study. Maybe we should recreate it on, okay, the top few, did they show up a lot of the time? What I do have data on, unless you wanted to bring up another thing, Rahul, did you want to go somewhere else or?
No, let's go with that. And then I do have
Okay.
a thought around attribution.
So
But yeah.
we and maybe in a minute we'll flip to the next slide and talk about the framework, but went and analyzed a couple thousand sites and observe that most folks almost certainly are not showing up in LLMs as often as they would like to. We analyzed 2,000 US-based sites across industries, across size of company, and looked at the content of the site, inferred topics, then inferred what are the questions prospect would ask through the funnel, and said, hey, how often did that brand show up? The answer was 16%. The median company, the 50th percentile, 16%, and they got cited 6% of the time. And so, like, there almost certainly is real opportunity for all of us to show up more often. And to the Rand Fishkin example, hopefully be part of the 3 or 4, the next words I'm making up, that show up often over and over again on those lists. Hopefully that is true, and hopefully you can be part of that list.
Yeah.
This is like a good segue because it goes into, okay, the question everyone's asking is, okay, how the heck do you do that? So
Yeah,
therefore, let's talk about the 4 main things. So, Guy, you walk us through.
sure thing. I invite everyone listening to think about AEO as close to what good SEO always should have been. There's heavy overlap between them. They're not identical, but they are similar. And the differences are good things to manage your team against, or if you're on the team, set expectations, with your CMO, CEO board against, and they're against these 4 categories. To cover them briefly, and then we'll probably go into them in more depth.
Yeah.
They're content, technical, authority, and measurement. And in content, the core expansion from SEO to AEO is just what we've been talking about. You've been thoughtful. You had a bunch of topics that you wanted to be known for, and you represented them as keywords. Now you represent those as baskets of questions that you need to answer through the funnel in depth and make relevant and personalized. 2 is technical, where you go from all the work we've done for SEO to the single biggest thing LLMs value incrementally more than SEO is signals about structure and meaning of your content. How can you do that? You could structure the content on the page with like bulleted lists, or you could structure it in metadata, like we were talking about SEO metadata. We could talk more about that. Third is authority, where Rahul was talking about it. LLMs are looking for truth, and the way they perceive truth is consensus. They want to see widespread consistency in what's being said. So if your brand is mentioned over and over again on a bunch of different sites, links optional, different than search, they will perceive that as truth and increase your authority score. And the last is measurement, where really this is like the output of the other 3 and gives you feedback loop for them. But keyword ranking just doesn't exist as a concept. And so you go to, okay, what percentage of the time was I mentioned? Which is like a probability score because, as Coach was saying earlier, the things keep changing as they are personalized. And then you go from there to some PR comms like concepts, like what was my share of voice relative to competitors? What was the accuracy of what LLM said as they re-swizzled my carefully crafted words? What was my message pull through? What was the sentiment? And we've got data on all of those, but they're not where any of us would want them to be.
You know what's fascinating is I had this aha when I was talking to a CMO of a massive company. And I realized after they were talking about their problems is that so many times they have teams like one team's over social, one team's over PR, one team's over content, and like all these teams are separate. And obviously they know the narrative, but the specific messaging is way different. So the past models of how people used to do things was not aligned. And now AI has access to social and to PR and to website and all this stuff. Like the messaging and the narrative has to be consistent because, like what you said, if the consensus is has one kind of version of the narrative here, another version here, it gets confused and then it has to pick. And I'm like, I don't want to have the AI guess. I want it to know. You know what I mean? You see that same thing, Guy or Raul? I mean, Raul, I'm curious. Let's start with you. Like with third party stuff, like how do you make sure that the things you're putting out there are consistent enough so that what he just said with consensus is consistent?
Oh, absolutely. It's a huge part of ensuring that not only are third parties talking about you, but the way that they're talking about you aligns with your overall brand guidelines. And one thing that's actually coming up often with our customers is like as they change their positioning, their messaging, even their pricing of their product, you can't just change that on your website anymore. You've got to go find out how you're being talked about across the web and make sure that those publishers update that content as well because just updating it on your website isn't enough because there won't be that consistency or that consensus, as Guy mentioned, across the web where these LLMs are actually pulling this data from.
Nice. I
And
love it.
I'll
Keep going.
build on what Rahul said and said like it say what Rahul and team have built is so special and so valuable in part because the LLMs are doing searches almost all the time now. Maybe one day that'll change, almost certainly it will because the searches are expensive, but it is so you can have an impact tomorrow, not metaphorically tomorrow, literally tomorrow. We have a whole bunch of examples that are in a week, in 2 weeks, in a month, not the like 3 to 6 months that it took to build backlink authority. And those were not cherry picked. Like we did plenty of things that didn't work, but finding things that did work was easier because it's a new medium, and finding things that worked quickly was great. That's the upside. You can have an impact quickly. The downside, I echo completely what Rahul said. You can damage your brand in a way that didn't happen with SEO by having out-of-date content up there, that it can inflict harm. So much so that like updating that out-of-date content is critical. Rahul was mentioning that. And then on your site, like in SEO times, if somebody said, hey, you've got this pocket of content over here that's out of date and you're not going to get to it for a while. If you said to me in SEO times, hey, you know what, why don't you take that down for a little while? I'd be like over my dead body. In AEO times, it's not a crazy question to ask. The answer may still be no, but like you're not nuts for asking it. You know what I mean?
You're not, yeah, yes, I understand. Maximus, you have a question for us? What do you think?
Guy, that is the room's question right there. Webflow's own case study showed FAQs plus schema on just 6 pages drove half of new AI citations in 2 weeks. So for a marketer with zero AEO infrastructure, what is the fastest quick win to ship this week?
In my humble opinion, the first
Guy,
thing
your
to
own case study had
Oh,
FAQs plus
hang on.
schema on just
Sorry about that. I
in
pushed
my
the
in
button
my
wrong.
humble opinion, the first place to double check before actually answering the question is, do you have the SEO fundamentals in place? You know, as we were talking about earlier, like if you don't, if you've got broken links or you're missing SEO metadata, like don't bother with any of the stuff. Go fix that. Okay, if you've got that,
Right.
the two quick wins, really three to ship this week. Experiment with answering a few questions. Add schema to your site. Schema is metadata, if you haven't already heard of it, that uh, Google and a bunch of others created like 8 years ago that says, oh, here's a product page, here's a bio page, here's an event page that serves up on a silver platter, like we were saying a minute ago, the structure and meaning of your content. And the third, go have other people talk about you. Brand is back, so you talk consistently. PR is back, so you show up in a bunch of other places. Go get mentions so that you build your authority. Those are the quick wins I'd go after first. What would
Raul?
both of you say?
Yeah, what do you think?
No, I definitely agree with that in terms of like what are the actionable parts of it. I also think it's helpful to get like a baseline of like, well, how are you doing today? So, there are, plenty of like visibility tools out there. I mean, Webflow has a great one where you could essentially just see like what is your share of voice today. It's
Yeah.
always good to have a baseline, like where are you starting with, where do you want to go? To Guy's point, like most brands, I think he mentioned like have about like a 16% share of voice. So there's a lot of room for growth. So if you come back and you see you're only showing up in about 5% of the prompts you want to, that's not the end of the world. You can definitely increase that, but it's good to have a baseline. So at least like when you put this work in, you have something to measure from that starting point.
Yeah. Um, Curious, and Guy, I know you talked about schemas. I'm just curious, like, do you have a version of one or one you could show saying, I really love how this works and this, we know it works well on Webflow. Like, I'm just curious if you can show anything. What do you think? Anything for me?
Yes. So, um, schema, if you looked at the source of a page, really enriches the page throughout. And so for the example that Maximus brought up, we experimented with the top 6 product pages on Webflow. And by we, I mean Vivian Huang, who runs our SEO AEO team.
Hmm.
And she said, hey, I've got this product page. I'm going to add structure on the page by adding FAQs at the bottom.
Yeah.
Same data, just structured now. And I'm going to add schema. So humans don't see it, but the LLMs and other machines do throughout the page. As Maximus said, in 2 weeks, those 6 pages got 57%, more than half of the incremental citations Webflow got. Cool. Mind blowing, at least for my little brain, when you realize we have 250,000 pages. Those 6 got
Right.
more than half, and they got 24% more traffic in 2 weeks. And that is one tool among many to help improve how you show up. So we talked earlier about the research, 16% mention rate, 6% citation rate, share of voice relative to competitors, 15%. You're showing up 1 out of 6 times. Then we measured the soft stuff. What was the sentiment? 50 is neutral, 0 is negative, 100 is positive, 57. Very even keel. What was accuracy? Where we had a made up scale of 0 to 100, where if you got it wrong, it impacted you more. 63 out of 100. Really not great. Like you'd want it to be more accurate. And message pull through was 24 out of 100, which was effectively none. You've been reduced to a set of features. So all this work we do to have our brand show up the way we want, having far less of an impact than we would like. And so this technical stuff is one aspect. The offsite mentions that Rahul was talking about is another, as are the content you create and how you measure it.
Yeah. What do you think, Will?
Yeah, I think that's spot on. And it also, part of like what Guy is saying is like, hey, these are great facts to actually ground yourself in like how AI search is working. So thank you, Guy, for actually doing the work and the research to be able to educate us on kind of what that truth is. But I think the other thing that's like a lot more difficult with this is it's not just updating your site. It's not just the architecture. It's not just adding more blog posts. It's not just about the content you directly control. Now there is, PR effectively is back. Brand is back, as Guy was saying. And it's important that that consensus is actually shared, not just showing up in these third-party sites, but also making sure that it's accurate at the same time. And, what also could have been accurate when it was first published 2, 3 years ago, things change. Like your messaging changes often. I mean, we're all marketers here. We know how often we change our websites and our positioning.
Right.
And so every time you change your positioning on a product or, for like, the company as a whole, you have to make sure that's reflected wherever the LLMs are pulling this data. And so that work, you can certainly do it in-house if you want, but that's really important to make sure that there's consensus around the web, around like what your product does and how it's actually being positioned.
Fascinating. Guy, I'm going to shift a bit. I'm going to
Coach,
switch
you
over
asked
to
for the
Rahul.
visual. I've got it if you want it.
Oh, yeah, please, please. Let's do it.
Uh, Let me share my screen. Hopefully you can see the whole thing here. Give me a second. There. Can you see this?
Yes.
So here's one of those 6 product pages. It's about our CMS. So here's the product page up above. Visually compelling experience for humans. Here's some FAQs. Okay. That were added. And we said, hey, you know what? Having the FAQ expanded, not ideal for the human. So great, I can do that. Here is the schema. So this is that same part of the page, but this schema says, oh, hey, this is a question. That's the type of thing this is. Here's the name of that question. Here's the answer to that question. Same content as you have here, but very easy for the LLM to understand. Here is the next one where, okay, here's the next question and the schema. And so it's a way of serving up on a silver platter to the LLM.
Mm.
Here's the structure. They're actually quite good at reading the HTML as well. This helps them even more to go understand the structure and meaning of your content.
I remember I was at a CMO event and someone talked about AEO, talked about how the load time on the back end matters because AIs are looking for speed. So one is like, is the loading time important? And then two is with the schema, if you don't have it, then they have to work harder or search more to be able to get to the answers they get to. So what you're essentially saying is, okay, obviously it has to load fast, but when it does load, you have to have the information in such a way so the AI has an easier way of finding the information to be able to pull it back. Would you agree with that?
I would in and what's the dynamic? The LLMs are constantly trading off how hard is it to consume and process your content versus how good
Hmm.
is the content.
Yeah.
The cheaper you can make this, the better. That is one way to do it. And when we looked, if I may um, shift to it a little bit, Coach,
Sure.
what's holding people back? So we made up this across those four categories. We made up a scale 1 to 5, and we
Right.
assessed these couple thousand sites where 1 is good SEO, 5 is good AEO. The median site was a 2. We all have a lot of work to do.
Yeah.
Not unexpected, right? We're starting at SEO. In a couple of years, if we're all 2s, that's a problem. That results in those outcomes that we didn't like. Okay, what's holding people back? So when we looked, to my genuine surprise, it was fundamentals. So historical fundamentals, stuff we already should have had right. 62% of sites had too many broken links. Internal broken links. Our made-up definition for that threshold was 10%. More than 10% of their internal links were broken.
Wow.
Technical. Next, technical. They had illogical heading structure. And by that, I mean they had 61% of them had 1H1, H2, H3, H4 logically structured. I can't tell you how many websites I look at and like the headlines in H5. That actually is a signal for the LLMs.
Right.
Three, 60% of them were missing too much SEO metadata. Our made up threshold,
Mm.
20% of pages. So 60% of sites had more than 20% of pages missing SEO metadata. I'll keep going. There are a couple more if you're game.
Yeah, keep going.
Those are technical. In content, the LLMs really value freshness. 95%, this is not from this research, this is other research. 95% of ChatGPT citations were updated in the last 10 months. The median was 6 months. I think that came from our friends at Graphite. What we found in our study was 54% of sites have way too much stale content. How did we define that? 90+% of the content was updated more than 6 months ago. Pretty low bar.
Wow.
90%. Okay, that's existing fundamentals. 3 new AEO fundamentals. We all talked about answering questions. 57% did not answer prospect questions well. They just weren't geared for it. But the number one thing, Rahul knows all about this. The number one thing holding people back in new AEO land, 73% of them lacked widespread mentions. And our made up scale for that was look at what the site's about, discern questions, go to the LLMs and answer those questions. Go look at the top 50, 100 sites that are listed there. How many of
Mm.
those did you show up in? 73% of them didn't show up even a quarter of them, not even a quarter of the relevant sites. And the very last thing to mention, these were the top 7. This one is on authority. Is you should show you've got the goods to talk about something. Google called this EAT, expertise, experience, authority, and trustworthiness.
Yep.
55% of sites hid their topic authority. By that made up scale, I mean that 85% plus of the pages on the sites that should have had a byline and an author bio, like a blog post or something, didn't. These are all actionable things. They're all fundamental things that we can go after across content technical authority and then measure it the right way.
I agree. Oh, I my camera. So sorry. I love all those stats. Just, I'm kind of a stat geek, which is great. Raul, I know you guys just did some research too, so you have some research that kind of leaned into this as well.
Yeah, a few things that are interesting. And first of all, Guy, thank you for presenting that. That's fascinating. And it's really good to have those numbers behind everything that you're saying. One thing that we came out recently was specifically when it comes to this topic of kind of authority and third party mentions, like how many of them do you need to have a sustained increase in visibility? And what we were able to do is we looked across our customer base and how many kind of offsite mentions that we were able to get for them. So how often Noble was able to get these brands mentioned in third-party citations for the prompts that they cared about and wanted to show up in. And what we found is you need to have at least 4 mentions per month. So that you mentions to see a sustained increase in visibility, if you don't have at least 4 mentions a month, then what could happen is you could see this increase in visibility, but then it's going to plateau and then decrease as a result.
Wow.
So it's not something you could just kind of do a one-time investment in. It is something that you should, kind of continually invest in to get these mentions in these third-party citations. And also a part of that is because these citations do evolve and they do change over time. And so it's not like, okay, we can look at the citations at one point in time. You do need to
Right.
constantly kind of evaluate what those citations are, doing the outreach to those publishers, because at the end of the day, the LMs are looking at these authors and publishers as kind of the authority behind like whatever that topic or that answer is. And so making sure that you're mentioned often is really important. And then also the accuracy behind them as well. One thing that we're actually kind of launching this with a few of the visibility trackers is that they're able to identify how often your brand is misrepresented in the answers and then the
Mm.
citations behind them. And so what we're also doing right now is we're reaching out to those publishers that are being cited. And it's not about just mentioning the brand if they're not mentioned, but it's making sure that they're mentioned accurately. So updating the content on that site or on that blog post, whatever that article is,
Right.
to ensure it aligns with the brand's guidelines as well. So that's really important. And the last thing is like to Guy's point earlier, these results can happen pretty quickly. So what we saw with a few of our customers is that within the course of 3 to 4 months, we're able to increase visibility by 20 to 30% relative to where that brand started before. So these are not things that take 6 to 12 months to take into effect. You can see a bump in visibility within just a few months of really kind of targeting these citations and these third-party
Right.
sources.
That's awesome. Guy, I'm going to give you some time. Manny was asking about how you edit the schema. You want to talk about that real quick?
100%. I think I'll answer the question with a bit of context because it sheds a light on it. 73% of Google's top 10 search results have schema in them. But at the same time, only 12% of websites have schema on them. Makes no sense at all. And by the way, if you look at us in B2B, it's 2%. Why? I think it's because to do schema, you need an engineer and a marketer in the same room at the same time, and that almost never happens. So to update schema, you would go into the HTML of the page, go to schema.org, pick one of the several hundred versions of schema that there are, like the product one, the bio one, the FAQ one, and so on, and then populate the content from the page into schema. It happens that the product team at Webflow automated this. They said, hey, we want to make sites very easily crawlable by LLMs. And so let's automate creation of all the metadata they might care about. Sitemap.xml to go crawl the site. SEO, title and metadata. Alt text for images. By the way, little detour, but a relevant one. LLMs will not crawl your images nor your videos. They will absolutely crawl the alt text and the transcripts because those are much cheaper for them to crawl and they value them quite highly. And then the fourth piece of metadata is schema. So in schema, you can have a tool, Webflow happens to be one, where it needs to really crawl and understand the content of your page. Then automatically pick one of the hundreds of schemas, then automatically connect the content from the page into the metadata. If that sounds like a lot, it a little bit is because most of us marketers like don't do that in our sleep. We create that content in our sleep, but the slotting it in tends to be harder. And so it's one of the places where, in my humble opinion, actually having a tool matters, not because I work for a company that does that, but because it tends to not be aligned with the skill sets we got trained as marketers.
Yeah, totally get it. Earl, any thoughts with that? And then I'm gonna sit Maximus and see what kind of questions he ask you. What do you think?
No, I think I love this like new era that we're entering because I think for the first time, like there's opportunity for a smaller brand to really emerge, take advantage of like the advice that the guy is giving in terms of like structuring the website properly, having the right content on your site, and also taking advantage of everything offsite that you could do. I think it's just a fun time to be a marketer and to kind of be alive. And it's
Yeah.
no longer that okay, the companies have been around for the last 20 years, they've invested millions of dollars in search. Like it's impossible to supplant them. All that has changed, and it's just going to continue to change over the next 5 to 10 years. And I would say that the thing that I kind of love the most talking to marketers right now is that yes, there's a lot that are kind of scared and like apprehensive with all the changes, but the ones that are really leaning into this moment and saying, "Hey, things are changing, but we're going to take advantage of that." I love kind of talking to those people who have that perspective, because it is kind of a, once in like a decade opportunity to really get discovered in a way that was really difficult just like 5 or 10 years ago. And like the best way I get, like I can say this is like, how often did your CEO ask you about SEO before? I mean, it was never coming up. Whereas I'm talking to marketers now where AI search comes up in the board meeting. And that's just, it was
Right.
never that relevant before. So it's a really exciting time. And I also have my own perspective as far as like where AI search is going, where today it's a lot of the research that you're doing, but I do see a future where more of the actual transaction can happen over the LLM. Always agree that for these high consideration purchases, like the website is, always going to be visited. But I do think more and more you're going to see like booking a demo in the LLM. You're going to see some transactions occur. And I think what's cool about that is not only will you see like faster value for the consumer or for that buyer, but then the attribution will also get better as well to say like how often are you showing up, and then what is the actual transaction that's happening. Like there'll be a better kind of closed system. They'll give us more data on just like the value of showing up, and then what is that purchase or what is the action that happens as a result of it.
Yeah, I'm going to talk in a second because some of what you talked about is like things I've been thinking about a lot about the direct actions taken inside of LLMs, you know. But before I do that, Maximus, I'm going to give you a challenge. Can you ask a question that would draw a really good answer from both these two and at the same time roast me? Can you do that?
Coach, asking for a two-part question and a roast at once is exactly how a man ends up with a framework for breakfast. All right, for both of you, what is the biggest thing marketers still misunderstand about AI search? The thing that will look obvious a year from now and has everyone in this room quietly underestimating it today?
It's a good question. What do you think?
I I think I don't think people realize how Google can make AI mode default whenever they want. So yeah, we get a lot of answers say where people start looking at the blue links. I think that that's important. But if and when Google flips the switch where AI mode becomes the default, then all you're going to have is essentially like AI answers at that point, and kind of the optionality of whether or not you want to lean into AI search or not kind of goes away because Google still has distribution. They're still integrated with Safari and the iPhone.
Right,
They
right.
have like over 80% of all search traffic today. And they're slowly doing this with the AI overview. And then if you ask a question with the AI overview, you're getting to AI mode. AI mode is showing up like in the Google like search bar. But that moment when AI mode becomes the default, I think you're gonna see like 1,000x more investment in AI search because you'll have to at that point.
What do you think, guy?
I agree with Rahul 100%. Full stop. The other thing I would add is that some, definitely not all, not close to all, but some say, okay, here's this brand new thing. I need a new team, a new agency, a new approach. I'm going all in on AEO. And I don't think the data supports that mental model. AEO really is close to good SEO. Your AEO team is your SEO team. Your AEO agency is your SEO agency. They may choose not to get good at expanding from SEO to AEO, in which case you'd want to make a change,
Mhm.
but you wouldn't want to make a change because they're an SEO firm. That is the right background for AEO.
Right, Rahul, kind of going with this. When you talk to people all the time with third party mentions, that kind of stuff, what are the, I guess you say, misnomers, the um, myths, the things you have to constantly correct people all the time, saying, "Okay, this is not how this thing works." Like, what are marketers coming to you with? You're like saying, "I gotta help you understand this." What is that?
I think it's natural that brands want to start with their own website. They want to start with the content on their own website. They want to start with like the structure of their own site. They want to like really focus on the properties that they own first. I think that that's natural, and I think that that's what like SEO has taught us over the last like 20 plus years. But I think the importance of offsite, I just don't think it is like truly resonating. Just the importance that 85% of these citations are third party citations, like that's just hard to grasp for a lot of marketers because it's always been
Right.
their own website, their own blog post, content that they own. And so I think that is kind of the one thing that may not resonate with them right away. I think the other thing is that when they think about third-party citations, they think about like tier one publishers and publishers that maybe their PR team have relationships with. But what's interesting is that those are not typically the publishers that are cited by these LLM. It's really these niche publishers and authors that your PR team may not actually have a relationship with because it's not necessarily the Forbes or the New York Times or the Wall Street Journal or all these like tier one publishers that a PR team has spent, decades building relationships with. And so when you're
Why is that? Is that because of the niche and matching intent? Like, why would that be?
my thought I have kind of two hypotheses. One is a lot of those tier one publishers are blocking the LLMs. And so if you're blocking the
Okay.
crawl rate, you're less likely to show up. And then the second thing is like, if you're selling a CRM, like it's only niche publications are going to be talking about best B2B SaaS CRMs as an
Right.
example. Like it's not going to be the mass market publications that have very specific answers to those questions. So I think it also comes back to the type of content that is being cited and how it relates to the question that's being asked.
Fascinating. Um, Guy, I think I might have the question. You see the one from Drew, Guy, on there? I can repeat it for you. Drew's asking, he didn't realize there's categories of schema. Does the Webflow tool match the page content with the right schema? And do you recommend you have separate bio pages for major blog contributors?
So yes, on the first part, there are hundreds of different schema. It's all called schema overall, but like within it, you would say, oh, hey, here's the FAQ schema. Here's the company overview schema. In fact, you might have multiple of them on the same page. If I'd gone through that page earlier and we went to a different part of the page, you would see the Webflow company schema laid out on every page to say, hey, here's who we are. Yes, the Webflow tool does that automatically, and it does it automatically for individual pages and in the CMS. If you've got like, 100 blog posts separate from 100 help support articles, separate from 100 tech docs, and it'll populate each page appropriately with the content from that page, full stop. Should you then have a separate bio page for each person who is speaking? I haven't seen data one way or the other. I don't think it could hurt so that you are building up the authority well. But I personally haven't seen data one way or the other. The thing I have heard anecdotally from other experts and resonates for me too is not directly relevant. But the thing I was thinking about in answering the question, Drew, was some folks are like, hey, should I create like one mega FAQ of all my FAQs for the whole company? And
Right.
sounds appealing, but if those FAQs are about a bunch of different topics, for the LLM to hold that heterogeneity in one context window or one moment of processing, that's harder for it to do. And so I would separate that out. I don't know that that concept matters in bios. I'm not sure it's relevant.
Interesting.
So yeah,
Obviously,
don't have great advice on that one.
something to test, I guess, or something, right? But to your point, I
Yep.
think a lot of people don't know about the different types of schema to be aware of. You know what I mean? So I think it's pretty important. Um,
Which, to the point earlier, is why I think you need an engineer and a marketer in the room at the same time.
yeah.
Which is so hard to make. That's practically why I personally believe so few companies have actually done it. Even though, in addition to the stats I said earlier, Google themselves said if you have structured data on your site, you get 42% more like rankings, citations, quick goodness, and yet still most of us haven't done it.
That's fascinating. Maximus, give me one more juicy question. Not too, spicy, but just give me a juicy one. What do you think? What's a good question we can ask him?
Coach wants juicy but not spicy, which is his usual order when he's about to ask something very spicy. Here's the one for both of them. If a CMO gave you 90 days and no extra headcount, what is the single move you would bet on first to create measurable AI search lift? And what tempting move would you tell them to ignore?
These are great questions. I need to have him ask all the questions. What do you think?
Why don't you go first, Guy?
I would go to either Webflow directly or to an MCP and ask it to add schema to all my pages. And full stop. That'd be the thing I do on my own. Once I'd done that, I'd then go ask it to add a simple way to update is add the date. That's not enough. That's black hat. And add FAQs at the bottom, like we were talking about. I'd have MCP crawl the pages. Right. I'd go to an LLM, MCP into my CMS and have it create that so that you've
Right.
got structured updates. Don't need another human to do that. And then I go by Noble. I'm not kidding. It's not because Rahul's here, but I would go by Noble.
There we go. Bam. I'll
Right.
second the motion, guy, or Raul. Just I second the motion. Go buy Noble.
Oh, yeah. Well, appreciate the shout out. Similar with everything that OneMind is doing as well as Webflow. But I agree with what Guy is saying in terms of like what's priority and also what you can control the quickest and get quick wins from. I think that structure is really important. So I would definitely prioritize that. I think also just like, people kind of forget this, but like having a good product, having product market fit, like all those fundamentals still really matter when it comes to showing up and like getting people to talk about your product. So while these optimizations are important, it doesn't necessarily get away from the fact that like you have to have product market fit, you have to have happy customers, like can't forget about all those.
There's no amount of
Uh,
SEO or AEO that's going to make up for lack of PMF.
right. That's going to make up for a bad product or something. Rahul, I'm just curious. From third party sites could mean a ton of things. I've been meaning to ask you this. I just came to mind. Um, how do you help people understand like when they should go to like obviously using Noble for like cross blog promotion or features versus like a pure PR campaign versus like YouTube or whatever? Um, like how do you help people understand where the focus weight, whatever you want to call it, to focus on for third party sites?
Yeah, the metric that we look at is citation frequency. So across all the different prompts that you're tracking, which sources and specific articles are showing up the most often. And so if you are able to find that, okay, this article is being cited like 5 times across these, 20 searches or 20 prompts that we care about, that's how I would prioritize which specific third-party articles to go after and trying to get mentioned in those if you're
Yeah.
not, making sure it's accurate. And this is also kind of like something that I think it's harder for some marketers or SEOs to kind of accept. Domain authority does not matter as much as the citation does. So there are often times where we will see that an article that has kind of a lower domain authority, maybe like 30 or 40, that'll get cited over, a website or an article that has a domain authority of 80 or 90. So domain authority was important for backlinks, was important for ranking. It's not as important when it comes to mentions and AI search visibility.
Fascinating. What do you think, Guy? Because like that, I think is a thing I hear all the time about domain authority. Because I've had people tell me like in the past, like Momentum had bad domain authority, but I was like, yeah, but my AI search is off the charts. So like, I know what you're talking about, you know. So what do you think, Guy? How do you people handle it? Because domain authority was like one of the golden metrics people looked at before, you know.
I agree, and I think it would be incorrect to say it doesn't matter. Both are true at the same time. That for
Right, right.
AEO, it's the content itself that ends up mattering more. And I couldn't agree more with Rahul on prioritizing the sites that are cited more often in the answers to the questions you care about. And because SEO still matters a ton, domain authority still matters a ton.
There's a couple of things before we go that I want to make sure that I'll make sure everyone on the line will be receiving. So obviously we'll be the recording of this as well. This is the thing you posted before, guys. So I'll be sending this out as well as a follow-up for everyone. And then Raul, I thought you guys had a research thing you did as well through Noble. And I'll if you can send me that link and I'll make sure we send it out as well because both are like really, really, really good materials to kind of dive into. And just want to tell you, well, thank you so much. I don't think we have any other questions and we're about time. So I just want to say thank you. And before we go, Maximus, you want to say anything? You want to give some comments? What do you think, my man?
Only that this was a very strong reminder that AI search is not some side quest for marketing, it is quietly becoming the map. Guy brought the structure, Rahul brought the distribution, and Coach, as ever, brought 17 follow-up questions and somehow all the right ones. Thanks to both of you, genuinely sharp conversation. Coach,
There
take
you
us
go.
home.
Oh, how nice of you. Well, I just want to tell you guys again, thank you for everyone joining and listening. This will be available to be watched later or to be, watch the recording. I'll be sending out obviously the AEO maturity index from Webflow with Guy, and then Rahul will send me your stuff too, and I'll send it out through Noble. I can't highly recommend more both of these people as individuals and then their services. Webflow's been great to work with, and Noble, I said, we worked with both companies twice, at least in the last year. So I can say nothing but good things about both of you. Just want to tell you thank you for taking the time.
Of course, thank you for having us.
Yeah,
Thanks for having us. That was a lot of fun.
cool. Okay, y'all, have a good day. Talk to you soon.
Cheers.
Bye.